magazines, and must-see sci-fi, 50 movies that are out of this world. Her contributions as a writer and researcher include the books Warner Brothers, 100 Years of Storytelling, Natalie Wood, Reflections on a Legendary Life, Grace Kelly, Hollywood Dream Girl, and the 2020 HBO Emblem documentary, Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind. She has appeared on TCM, CNN, and way too many podcasts to mention. Please welcome Sloan DeForest.
It's great to see a packed house of fellow time travelers. Welcome to the original Time Machine movie, the one that blazed a trail that all the others followed. You know, I was thinking about why I'm so fond of this movie, and I feel like you can relate. Dissatisfaction with the present time is what motivates the hero to build a time machine. In a lot of other time travel movies I can think of, it's, characters journey through time by chance or by accident, or, it's without necessarily having that intention. And then there are other movies where time travel is a necessity to save the world from a terrible fate, like in The Terminator, for example. But I love the time machine because the only reason time travel is invented in this movie is because the inventor doesn't care for the era in which he lives. I know, right? As TCM fans, I'm sure you can relate. Not a fan of the 21st century, full disclosure, I'll just admit it. But, I think that's what we connect with, just the desire to be able to travel back to the past or into the future, basically pretty much any time but right now. But as another character in the film says, here we are, and we have to make the best of it. So, in that spirit, I'm happy you're all here to make the best of this time with me and my special guest, who is an expert on the time machine and its director-producer. He is a writer, film historian, and curator. His books include Taschen's Life Hollywood and George Pal, Man of Tomorrow, Pal's authorized biography. He has also been the curator of George Pal's estate since 2011. Please help me welcome Justin Humphreys.
Hi, everybody. A full house. This is fantastic. Thank you for coming out.
And thanks for being here, Justin.
My pleasure.
Nice jacket.
It's not, I couldn't find Scotch plaid like Rod Taylor,
but it's still very 1890s. And speaking of, that's actually when H.G. Wells published The Time Machine. It was 1895, and yet no one ever brought it to the big screen until one visionary filmmaker came along. Tell us a little bit about him.
How many of you know George Pal's work, know who he is? So I'll give you some background on him. He was born in Hungary and made a name for himself as an animator in Europe with a really beautiful series of stop-motion short films. Came here to Hollywood and did the Puppetoons, which were also stop-motion for Paramount. You'll see that stop-motion figures really heavily in this movie. It did in a lot of his features. But in the early 1950s, Pal really was truly the father of the modern science fiction film. It seems almost inconceivable now that science fiction would be given short shrift by the studios, but they saw it as stupid and juvenile and unworthy of any kind of real adult attention. But Pal was a science fiction specialist when that was essentially non-existent in the studios. With films like Destination Moon, When Worlds Collide, War of the Worlds, he brought this extraordinary new intelligence and quality and gravitas to science fiction that hadn't been there before. And I think he had been so successful with War of the Worlds, he was in good with the H.G. Wells estate, and he picked The Time Machine because I think he saw it as the most cinematic property.
Yeah, exactly, and it seems obvious to us today that a time machine story would be inherently cinematic. I mean, of course, later came Marty McFly's DeLorean, Bill and Ted's phone booth, the hot tub time machine. I mean, whatever, if you're into that kind of thing. They all owe a debt to this movie. But Hollywood studios in the 1950s didn't share that vision, did they?
No, not at all. I found some brutal rejection letters that Powell got from the first studios he pitched this to. They were saying, oh, this is long and talky, it has some pictorial values, but no story, nobody's going to care about this. And they totally blew him off in the nastiest possible terms, and they were wrong. But he persevered. He had a hit with a kind of charming children's fantasy called Tom Thumb for MGM, which is a wonderful film. And he made it on a very modest budget, so he was able to get $800,000 to make this movie. That wouldn't cover the catering on Snow White that came out this year. And he made the entire movie with it. And it can still fill a house 65 years later. So yeah, he was up against it.
And I know you have a quote in the book that I love. George Powell said, "Nobody wanted to do the time machine, but I did it, and then everybody wanted to." So yeah, it was he was the visionary behind it, there's no doubt. And then the finished product and its success is all the more impressive given its $800,000 budget, and it had a shooting schedule of 5 weeks. So who were some of the talented people involved in making this?
I think that's one of the reasons this film has lasted like it had and why it succeeded in the first place. It's a very well-made movie. It was made with the best kind of studio-era talent. It was shot by Paul Vogel, who had won an Academy Award for shooting Battleground. It was edited by George Tomasini, who edited more of Alfred Hitchcock's movies than any other editor. He cut Psycho, he cut Rear Window. And once you've seen this a few times and you pay attention to the editing, it's beautiful. Russ Garcia, that did the soundtrack, is a huge debt on this. He was actually the neighbor of George Powell's secretary, Gay Griffith, and he had done this wonderful kind of exotica album called Fantastica Music from Outer Space. And she got a copy to George, and if you listen to Fantastica, it's like a dry run for the soundtrack for this. There's even sound effects you hear in the movie. And Russ did a phenomenal job on the score. It adds so much to the power of the movie. And there was a science fiction historian, Bill Warren, and he said this movie has a tone of wistful longing. And I think that's a perfect description, and it beautifully describes Russ's score. Also, Hua Chang and Gene Warren and the effects people did a magnificent job. Gene was a phenomenal problem solver and animator. Hua was one of the most talented people I've ever known. His credits stretch from everything from the Puppetoons to doing a headdress for Elizabeth Taylor for Cleopatra to doing most of the creatures for the original Star Trek. He was just a dynamo, and you'll see his work all through this. And then there's the cast. The cast is just superb.
Yes, let's talk a minute about the cast. Rod Taylor was fairly new to films. He just delivers as this hero. And then, of course, Yvette Mimieux is fascinating to me because she was a totally untrained newcomer, and she got so good. Her acting improved so much as they shot that they went back and reshot her early scenes because she was getting so much better on the set. And I think she nails it. But it's interesting. You mentioned how that he doesn't actually kiss her on the mouth because she was how old? She was
17. She lied about her age. And if you'll notice, he is a complete Victorian gentleman with her. And she's wonderful. Rod Taylor told me that he had wanted Shirley Knight for that part, but George Powell insisted on Yvette Mimieux, and Rod said he was right and I was wrong. Rod is the glue that binds this together. He's called upon to show every conceivable human emotion, and he does it beautifully. You can believe him as a guy who could create a time machine in 1899, but could fight his way through a cave of monsters. I mean, that's not easy to do. And this movie really put him on the map, the same with Yvette Mimieux. And Alan Young, who you'll remember from Mr. Ed and from Powell's Tom Thumb that plays Mr. Philby, he was very, very much like his character. Alan was a dear, sweet, wonderful guy, and it was his idea to have the character be a Scotsman, because Alan was Scottish. His real name was Angus Young. So
interesting. And then, of course, the cast was great, but the real star of the movie is the machine.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that.
Oh, no, it's along with Harper Goff's Nautilus submarine and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, it's probably the greatest piece of, what we would now call steampunk equipment in movie history. It's incredible. I mean, it looks like what an 1899 time machine should look like. I never once watching this movie have I looked at it and gone, I don't think that would work. I totally buy it. And the funny thing was, it was a magnificent piece of design, and actually some of the problems they had with it were solved very simply. The wheel on the back of it was turned by a barbecue spit motor. So don't let that spoil the illusion for you. And by the way, the time machine does exist, and it does work. The wheel spins and everything. It actually really works. I came here and I knew every one of you were coming. It belongs to a collector named Bob Burns, and it looks wonderful.
So just wrapping up here, I wanted to mention that we both shared the experience of, not together, but separately. You saw the movie on TV when you were about 10, and I saw the movie on TV when I was about 10. And I think that a lot of other filmmakers saw the movie on TV as kids because it's been so impactful to see at an impressionable age.
A lot of the great science fiction and fantasy filmmakers and effects people and sound effects people like Ben Burtt grew up on George Pal's movies because they knew he would give, when they wanted quality science fiction and fantasy, and he would give them quality science fiction and fantasy. He became a byword for it. So a lot of people like Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson and Ben and Phil Tippett, all these other people have stories about how one or more of the movies affected them very deeply as a kid. And I think one of the reasons why it was so popular then and why it's still so popular is Pal was what my friend Bob Stevens called science fiction's great optimist. You leave his movies feeling better about everything. They have this wonderful can-do, make-do, mid-century attitude that just says, whatever you throw at us, we're going to beat it. Martian invasion, we'll beat it. The world's going to be destroyed by a runaway planet, we'll beat it. Society sucks, let's build a time machine. So.
And that's what we're doing here. And it's been so groundbreaking in so many ways, and we have to wrap it up, but I'm looking forward to seeing this movie, like all of you, in 35mm. I never have. How many of you have never seen it on the big screen? Yeah, okay.
Wonderful, great. Wonderful. You're in for a big treat. And if you want to learn more about it, read her book on 50 Great Science Fiction Movies, and read my book, George Pal, Man of Tomorrow.
There we go.
Shameless plug.
All right. Let's get out of here so we can roll George Pal's The Time Machine.
Thank you.